Lots of questions posted on the previous episode of Utah ADV. I'll be sure to answer those in this episode, along with a few excerpts with a post-ride interview that I was able to get with Addie just a couple of days ago while I was still in Monterey wrapping up the trip. So that's coming up right after this. Welcome back to Utah ADV, and especially on the segment on the Pacific Northwest Tour, a tour that we just have now finished. Kind of the whole reason why this whole channel came together. And I feel like I might have disappointed you a little bit. The intent was to provide an update almost daily, if not state by state kind of thing, on what it was that we were doing. We had route changes. We had all kinds of things kind of rear their little heads and make some changes along the way. You know, you have your trip plan over here, and you have how the trip actually comes across, and how those two cross over is what makes the success of the trip, right? But obviously, I didn't go through. I did a lot of recording. I had 4 GoPros, 2 knockoff GoPros, which I'll talk about here in a minute. I had so much data, so much video that I just didn't have the capacity to store it all, to edit it, and then the bandwidth, the Wi-Fi to go through and upload things. So that kind of tied my hands a bit. We did the best that we could, and not to mention how exhausted we were at the end of every day. And so then to turn around and maybe throw something together, it just didn't work out. So we're going to try to make up for that here on the back end of the trip and go back and give you some highlights. So in subsequent clips after this one, we'll get into some specifics as far as the journey is concerned and where we camped and those kinds of things. But for this episode, there were some questions asked on the last episode of Utah ADV that I wanted to cover. But before I get into those, as far as what gear worked and how did we use, what did we do for water, those kinds of things. Before I get into those, though, I was very fortunate to do kind of a post-ride interview with my riding companion, with my daughter, Addie, while we were still in Monterey. I just got back from Monterey last night after a long journey over the state of Nevada. But we did it, actually it was in Pacific Grove, just along the coastline. And I've put together a few highlights of that interview, and I want to roll those now. I asked you before, very early in the trip, what did you leave on the side of the road? And I think now you might have more of an answer.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much I left on the side of the road until ending the trip, because when I ended the trip, I realized I was picking back up what I left on the side of the road, if that makes sense. Yeah. You know, you get back to reality. And it's no longer just going meal to meal, campsite to campsite. It's back to normal life. And that was kind of, I don't want to say hard, but I just wanted to be back on the road.
What was the hardest part of the trip for you?
Missing Brian.
Here's our camera operator right now.
Yeah. And just the parts of the ride that weren't so great. Were really cold and windy, but even that wasn't so bad at the end of it. Looking back every single day, I thought I could do that again, no matter what that ride looked like. And I was just ready to go the next day.
So what was the highlights for you? What was the brighter spots?
I don't know. There were so many, because we would ride for one day and I'd think, oh, this is my favorite so far, and then the next day be like, okay, no, this is my new favorite. And just the state parks and national parks we went through, and then just the coastline that we got to ride along, and it was all stunning. Glacier was out of this world. And every time we got back on for the day, either you or I would be like, oh, it feels so good to be back on day after day.
One thing I really appreciated about our gear was the Sena system and being able to constantly communicate with you, even though sometimes the wind noise was so heavy. I got used to hearing the Tiger's cadence in my headset. I would go into a corner especially Northern California, Pacific Coast Highway. And I would downshift, and I would hear you downshift almost at the same time.
Huh.
There, that you were following, that you were staying off your brakes, that you had it dialed in. You seemed to know precisely where to go through and hit the apex of the corners, how to slow down, how to scrub speed off before you hit the corner, and then accelerate out of that. So it was fascinating to hear that.
I don't know if adventure is supposed to be relaxing.
Okay, right, yeah, right.
So, yeah, I think relaxing is meant to be done at the end of the trip. You know, when it's all said and done. But it takes a lot of energy.
It does. A lot of vigilance, a lot of hypervigilance, awareness, what's going on around you, and what kind of nutcases are cutting you off on the freeway. It was amazing. So, were you able to relax at the end of the day?
I was, yeah. I think I was too tired to not relax at the end of the day.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely was. I feel like I'm still stuck on what the trip was. There's kind of whiplash in a way coming back. It was like, oh, we were just in Montana. We were just in Wyoming. We were just in, just still processing it. It was a lot, and we did it in a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, we covered a lot of miles for the days that we were out there.
Yeah.
You mentioned with the last YouTube post that made you feel somber.
Yeah, just because the circumstances that we had to stop with, which I'm happy that I was able to get home soon, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer with the radiator leak. So yeah, there was just that somberness of not going still.
Yeah, well, I'm glad everything worked out too. There's a post-trip letdown. For me, it's hard, and riding out here, packing up the bike, and getting it ready to put on the trailer to take back to Utah. There's a sadness to it, and I knew that was going to happen with the, leading up to that. But we're talking about maybe doing the rest of the coastline from Big Sur on down to the border, so we cover the entire coastline of the United States. If we do, we'll be sure to bring Brian along, and hopefully bring you along as well. Who said adventure is supposed to be relaxing, right? Yeah, this wasn't a vacation in that respect, and I appreciate her attitude and her just sheer guts in going through and doing what she is a great companion to travel with and camp with and ride with. Really had a lot of fun. A couple of you had some questions here as far as the trip itself is concerned, and I wanted to go through and do a response or two to one of those. Brad B posted what I did with the truck, and I answered that pretty much on the comment thread. He says, what gear did you use, or what gear didn't you use? So I want to kind of get into that a little bit. My biggest disappointment was this gear, was with this new Jetboil. And my biggest issue with this, as it has been with my previous Jetboil, is the piezo lighter stopped working. And the reason why I bought this was because Jetboil's marketing on their packaging said, it would last forever. Well, it didn't last more than 3 or 4 uses with this. We use this every morning to go through and make coffee, and on about the 4th morning, it pooped on me. Okay, it quit working. So that's going back to REI, hopefully, and I can get, I don't know if I want a new one, actually. And I have 2 other Jetboil appliances. The other Jetboil appliance that I have has a much better burner on it, and in fact, it articulates better than this one. This has 2 speeds on it, hell and off. And when it's in hell position, it'll boil water in 90 seconds flat, and that's what this was made for. And I get that, but can you hear that? It's not solid. It's not what I would have expected from Jetboil. And then to have the piezo lighter stop working, disappointed there. Speaking of coffee, one of my favorite things to do on a trip was to make coffee, thanks to this. This is the Java mill. It's made by GSI. I reviewed this in a previous episode. We use this every single morning to grind up fresh coffee beans. Loved it. Worked out really well. And to go along with that, we stored our coffee in this vacuum sealed container. This is by Fellow. I found this on Amazon. And if you'll notice at the top here, I don't know if you can see that really well, but there's this little green indicator. When I decompress it, I'm hoping you can see that. Now I can open it up and the beans are in there and ready to go. And then when I want to go through and reset the vacuum I twist the lid on top of that until this button goes through and recesses there. And when it does, the coffee is vacuum sealed, stays nice and fresh. We had the best coffee along the whole trip. Really worked out nicely. I can't say enough good about Goal Zero's Sherpa 100D. This is a product that kept us electrified. It has 2 ports on there to go through and charge. So I charged our Sena headsets. We had 2 of these, 1 on each bike. Worked out very well. This has a wireless charger as well. Just pop the iPhone on top of there, iPhone 7 or later, and we go through and charge up. And then we always had juice after the next morning ready to go. Probably the best product though that we used, the best piece of equipment to keep us rolling was this JB Weld. If you've been following along, you know that the radiator intake on the bottom part of the radiator on the Tiger, it already had a leak. I thought I had taken care of the leak by changing the hoses out before we left. Coming to find out, the leak is where the attachment fits right, is welded right onto the radiator itself, and there's a pinhole leak there, and we started getting antifreeze leaking out of that at high temperatures. So instead of maybe turning around, this happened about day 3 into the trip. We were in Bandon, Oregon at the time. I thought I'd try some JB Quick Weld and put a little bit on there, and it stopped the leak, and we were on with the rest of the trip. Right up until West Yellowstone. And it was at West Yellowstone that the whole thing kind of gave way. Even more so, covered Addie's left leg with coolant, with hot coolant. And the leak was so much that I didn't think we would be able to safely run the rest of the trip. We only had 2 days left at that point, and we happened to be about 5 hours away from my home here in Bountiful. But to get home, I had to use this again. And this time I scraped off the old JB Weld and went through and did copious amounts of this all the way around the fitting onto the radiator and got us home, no problems there. So if you don't have this on your kit, I would definitely recommend that you put some on there. A couple of other winners as far as the gear is concerned on the trip. We use these Xped sleeping mats. We have a pair of them. Addie used my spouse's there. These are a down-filled, self-inflating sleeping mat called the Sin Mat. This is a larger one. I have one that fits my frame and then one that's a little bit smaller. We've had these. We've been camping with these for about 7 years, and I absolutely love them. They compact nice to pack into the panniers. I kind of cheat a little bit and use this little D battery power operated pump to go through and blow them up. They blow up in less than a minute that way, as opposed to the hand pump, which takes longer there. One piece of gear that I didn't do a preview on was one that arrived shortly before I left on the trip, so I didn't have a chance to, and that is Climb's Outlander boot. And I was a little skeptical paying that amount of money for a boot where I've used service boots in the past and done just fine. The reason why I bought this one though is because of its lacing system. It goes through with this ratchet and laces up. There's a stainless steel cord that goes throughout the entire boot, and it laces it up evenly throughout the entire boot. Lots of great support and control there, a nice ankle cup for that to fit into. That's a big deal for me since my ankles are crap. I love this. This made the trip bearable for me. And while I had a break-in period with these, as far as certain rub points and my ankles are kind of funny as they're built into it, once they got broken in, these were probably the best item I had along the trip, besides the coffee maker kind of thing. Brad also asked another question about water. How do we manage water during the trip? And we use these Kriega 3-liter kind of dromedary bags, hydration packs. I like these a lot. These worked out well. I reviewed these as well, but didn't really have a chance to use them and have really kind of a report back on them. Loved it. This has a 360-degree bite valve there that would sneak up underneath my helmet, so I was able to go through and hydrate while I was riding. A little bit tricky to begin with, but once I got it down, it worked out really well. Nice and comfortable. Also with an extra pocket in the back that I was able to go through and store other snacks back there. So that's how we kept from not getting thirsty. We just filled it up at the beginning of the day. We would buy bottled water at a gas station or something that way and fill them up with 3 liters, and last us all day. And I had water left over to cook with when we got to our camps in the evening. Which brings me to our evening meals. I packed enough Mountain House products to go through and handle about 10 days worth of eating, both breakfast and dinner. Lunch we would find along the road at shops, or we tried to go and source locally as much as possible, much as we possibly could. Mountain House has never let us down. They're great value. They 1 pack feeds 2, even though we discovered that we started consuming our own packs at the end of the day. Our favorites are their beef stroganoff. The lasagna is very good. The chili mac is outstanding. That said, what I regret is not really being able to cook something fresh. And by the time we got on the camp, by the time we got camp set up after a long day's ride, I was just too tired to get back on the bike, go somewhere into a town, find a store, find some fresh stuff and bring it back, prepare it, wash it, and cook it up, and then do the dishes and everything after that. The Mountain House foods were really convenient in that we can eat them right out of the pack. We had no dirty dishes to take care of. We just boiling water to put that in there. And it gave us the caloric support that we needed as well. And that's how we subsisted. Todd Bryant asks, how did the gear hold up as far as a tent and our sleep systems were concerned? The tents that we're using, they're Alps mountaineering tents. I have a 2-person. Addie was using a 1-person. She probably would have appreciated a 2-person as well. It was her tent. They worked out extraordinarily well. We camped in, our first night was at Ocean Cove, along the Pacific coastline, and it was extraordinarily windy and got pretty cold, got down into the 40s there, and the tents did just fine in the wind. We did what we could to block the wind as far as positioning our bikes was concerned, but they were always warm. They dried out quickly with morning dew and those kinds of things. We had to pack up wet when we left Lincoln, Oregon. We got rained on all morning long, packed up wet, and then we got to our next destination, which was, I think we got to a motel at that point because we wanted to take everything out and dry. Things dried out nice and evenly, and didn't have to worry about any kind of mold or anything like that growing within the tent materials. The sleeping bags were outstanding as well. These were 0-degree bags. Both of them were down bags from REI. And kept us nice and warm. In fact, I was a little too warm, but it has a leg zipper to where I can let some more air in down in the footwell of the bag. And out of all my camping experiences, both with a motorcycle and with my overland rig, this trip was probably the most comfortable trip I had. So I hope that answers some questions for you. If you have more questions, please post them. I'll be glad to go through and address those in the next episode. The next episode is going to get into, and the subsequent episodes, more of the trip itself as far as the route was concerned and our plans and how they changed, our navigation tools. I bought a Garmin Zumo XT, like I said previously in an episode, and it wasn't all that impressive. Maybe that comes down to user error more than anything else. Just need to know how to use that a little bit better. I love its features and what it's able to do, and I'll talk about those in the next episode. So if this is your first time watching, thank you. Please subscribe and go back and watch the rest of the episodes to bring you up to speed. If you like this, let us know as well, and I appreciate that. And thanks for following us along. That means a lot to us. It meant something to us to be on the road and cut a couple of episodes knowing that we had a little bit of an audience out there to watch us and to see what was going on. So for UTADV, I'm Eric Young. Thanks for watching.